Welcome back to the Bible Made Easy with Stephen Craig. Today I want to give you a lesson that will give you the key to understanding the Bible and the world that we live in. I want to begin by reading a few verses from 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? Down in verse 26. For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. And this is the reason why someone like me, who would be despised by the highly educated people of this world, this is why I can give you the key to understanding the Bible and the world that we live in, because understanding the Bible does not depend upon the quality of your mind, but understanding the Bible depends on the quality of your heart. And this is why Jesus used parables. That's why we see dreams and visions in books like the Revelation, because very smart people can study and study and never see the truth. And then those of us who have a right heart can look and understand God's will and God's purpose. As I've already showed you in my previous lessons, that when you understand the Bible, it's really very simple. People think some books of the Bible are so difficult, but when you understand the Bible, as we've seen, you can go from Genesis to Revelation and have one harmonious message that fits together just so beautifully. And it can be understood as long as we have the proper heart. Now, I've already given you a lesson on our Old Testament timeline and showed you how all those complicated events of the Old Testament can be understood just very, very simply. Also, we even had one lesson where we looked at history of the world, 2,000 years of history from the time of Christ clear up to the modern time. And again, these things can be understood when you put them in perspective with the Bible. But to understand these events that occur in the world, it's most important to understand what's taking place spiritually. And so you might have your phone ready again for a screenshot at the new chart I'm going to give you today. Because understanding, or having a key to understanding the Bible, is understanding the struggle between Christ and Satan. When Satan first deceived Adam and Eve in the garden, God said this. He said, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He said, you'll bruise his heel, but he'll bruise or crush your head. And so that shows the struggle. That's when the struggle began between Christ and Satan. And of course, Satan was around all during the Old Testament, but he was pretty obscure. We see him, of course, in the book of Job. We see him in 2 Samuel tempting David to sin and numbering the people. We see him briefly in the book of Zechariah. But each time he appears as an adversary of God's people. But it's not until we get to the New Testament that Satan comes out from behind the veil to confront Christ one-on-one. And this is when we see that struggle between Christ and Satan. We see his power in that one of the temptations he offered to Christ. It said he took him up to an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of this world. And he said, all these I will give to you if you'll fall down and worship me. Of course, Christ didn't come into this world to worship Satan, but to defeat him. Some key verses we're going to look at in the New Testament. 1 John 3, verse 8. It says, for this purpose, the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. So that's the reason Jesus came into this world, that he might destroy the works of the devil. In Hebrews chapter 2, it said, inasmuch as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he likewise shared in the same. That is, because we're human beings and we have these fleshly bodies, that's the reason Jesus came in the flesh. Inasmuch as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, as the devil, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Once man sinned back in the beginning, the sentence of death fell on him, and Satan was in control. And he is referred to as the God of this world, even up in the New Testament time. But Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil and to release us from his power. Interesting verse in John chapter 12. This is when an angel spoke from heaven. Some people thought it was thunder. Others said an angel spoke to him. It was actually God that spoke to Jesus. And then Jesus said this. He said, this voice didn't come for me, but it came for your sakes. And he said, now is the judgment of this world. And now the ruler of this world will be cast out. So he's predicting that Satan's going to be cast out of heaven. He tells how he's going to be defeated. He said in the next verse, and if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. So he predicts that Satan will be cast out. It is, he's going to be defeated. And the way he's going to be defeated is through the cross. In the Revelation chapter 1, when John sees Jesus there in his glorified form, Jesus says, I am he that was alive and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades. If Satan had that power, but now to his death, burial, resurrection, Jesus said, I have the keys, I have the power. On over in Revelation chapter 12. The first few verses, there's a vision of the woman and the dragon, and it shows Jesus being brought into this world through the chosen people, that is, through Israel. And then as Jesus was born in this world, he sees a fiery red dragon there ready to devour Jesus as soon as he was born. Well, when Jesus was born in this world, people didn't see a fiery red dragon, but they did see a wicked king in the person of Herod the Great, who sent to Bethlehem to destroy the children to try to keep the Messiah from coming into the world. Then the next thing that we see in Revelation 12 is that Jesus was caught up to God and his throne, and so war broke out in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought, and the devil and his angels fought. Now, if you talk to most religious leaders and ask them, when did this occur? 9 out of 10 will probably say that Satan was kicked out back in the beginning. That's how he came to this earth to tempt Adam and Eve. But if you read the passage specifically, it says that when Satan was cast out, it says now has come the power and the kingdom of Christ and his glory. So Satan was not cast out until after the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, when Jesus ascended back to the throne. But it said that when Satan was cast out, it said he came down with great wrath because he knew that he had a short time. And so that's, again, to understand what's taking place in the physical world, you have to understand what's taking place in the spiritual realm. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to take a screenshot of this chart that we're going to be looking at in a little more detail. So what we see that after Christ overcame Satan through his death, burial, and resurrection, he ascended to the throne, that he's on the throne now, that he's reigning over his spiritual kingdom, which is the church. And when Jesus comes back again, it's not going to be to reign, but the Bible says that when he returns, that then he's going to deliver up the kingdom. He's going to give the kingdom back to the Father. Well, how about Satan? Well, as we've seen, he had been free. He had access to heaven and earth throughout Old Testament time. But once he is cast out, it says he came down to earth with great wrath because he knew he had a short time. Well, we see that in the history of the early church, that they experienced a great persecution from AD 100 to AD 313. And I think this was Satan's first attack against the church. But then something occurs in Revelation chapter 20. I believe that most of the revelation has already been fulfilled, that the revelation, for the most part, deals with the persecution of the Christians under Rome and the fall of Rome. And that's the reason it was written, to comfort these Christians who are going to go through this great persecution. But when you get to Revelation 20, it said, I saw a great angel come down, and he had a chain in his hand, and he laid hold of Satan, the old dragon Satan, and bound him and put him into a pit. for 1,000 years. Now, this is where it mentions the 1,000-year reign. But what I want you to notice is it says nothing about an earthly reign. There's nowhere in the Bible that ever says that Jesus is going to reign here on this earth. But what you see in Revelation 20, he said, I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for the witness of Christ. And those are referring to the martyrs of Jesus. And these are the people that lived and reigned 1,000 years during this time that Satan is bound. So I think what that's simply telling us that throughout most of the Christian age, that Satan will be bound. But then there is a futuristic part of Revelation 20, because he said when 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison. And it's described as a little season. Now, what's he going to do? It says that when Satan is released from his prison, that he's going to go out and gather Gog and Magog and surround the camp of the saints. And so when he goes to gather Gog and Magog, that he's going to deceive the nations. So what the Bible describes to us is Satan's going to have two attacks against the church. The first is physical, but this is describing a spiritual battle or attack against the church, because he said he's going to gather Gog and Magog. That is, that Satan's simply going to gather the wicked, and he's going to surround the camp of the saints. What's the camp of the saints? It's the church. So the church doesn't exist in one physical location on the earth. The church exists all around the world. Wherever people accept Christ and obey the gospel, they're Christians, and there you have God's church. So when it says that Satan is going to go out, gather the wicked, going to deceive the nation, surround the camp of the saints, this is a spiritual battle. But the good news is, of course, he's not going to overtake the church, because that's going to signal the final judgment, and Satan will ultimately be defeated. Now, the question is, when did this little season occur? Now, this is just my opinion that I'm going to offer up, and you take it for what it is. But I believe that this little season began with the Industrial Revolution. Because if you think about it, that the world had existed for thousands and thousands of years, relatively unchanged. And the limitations that God had placed upon man back at the Tower of Babel had stayed in place. But with the Industrial Revolution, we see this knowledge and technology exploding. And although there are many benefits from the increase of technology, that there's also many bad things as well. It's like with that's why we had such terrible wars, during after the Civil War, and then of course World War I, World War II were some of the bloodiest, because as our technology increased, the bloodshed also increased. But just think of how the world changed, like after in the 1700s, when the steam engine was invented, and men didn't have to rely on sails anymore. Once the train, instead of taking months to go from one side of the country to the other, it was just a matter of days. And especially the generation of the 1900s, that was a generation that literally went from the horse and buggy to the moon in one generation. And as fast as the technology went through the 17 and 1800s, it excelled in the 1900s. And then in the 1960s, with the invention of the little silicone chip and computers, look at how fast the technology has spread to the world. And remember what it says Satan's going to do? He's going to gather Gog and Magog, and he's going to deceive the nations. That's the kind of things that we see, and that can only happen in a modern world. That's the deceiving the nations can only take place when you have the spread of technology like we have in modern time. Now, how long the little season is going to exist, we don't know. The little season of God could last for 1,000 years, 100 years, or 1,000. We just don't know. But I think understanding this struggle between Christ and Satan is the key to understanding the Bible and understanding our modern world. Well, I hope this lesson has been enlightening and encouraging, because you have to remember the main message of the Revelation is victory in Christ. Hope you'll join me again.